What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you tune into the channel. Check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to talk about what's going on at ESPN and the battle that they have going on with uh, between ESPN and YouTube, right? And so I think a few days ago, Pat McAfee came out and he said some things really about ESPN that really kind of caught people off guard. Like you would not expect an employee of ESPN to call him out the way Pat McAfee did, right? But and not only was it Pat McAfee, I think it was what was a guy named JJ Watt, and they were they they kind of was calling him out for trying to really to what people think is like go up on the prices as far as like price gouging the fans and stuff like that. They're calling them out for that. And I which I thought was good, right? Because ESPN, in my opinion, they have two issues. Number one, their one issue is like credibility. And number two, then they have like an issue with YouTube because YouTube is streaming and it's free. And so YouTube is kind of on those 2 points are kind of undercutting ESPN. And ESPN right now is on shaky ground, and they should be, because you have a situation where they're losing credibility, and they losing credibility because people think that whatever ESPN does is always have an agenda behind it. Like they always trying to promote some type of agenda instead of giving you honest sports takes. It's always a narrative that they're trying to put out there. And I think that people are tired of that narrative. They just want honest sports takes. That's number one. The number two, YouTube is trying to they're trying to, ESPN is trying to go up, and trying to charge people for like, to, log into their different, their streaming services. Whereas though you can get it for free on YouTube, which I think is good. So on YouTube, the price is everything is charged through like it's paid for through like sponsors and stuff like that. And that right there is undercutting ESPN. But you got Stephen A. Smith, and I understand that Stephen A. Smith works for ESPN and he's going to take ESPN's, he's going to be on their side as long as he works for them. But he don't really have to do that. He really could stay out of it, or he could take the approach that Pat McAfee and just be honest about the situation, right? But Stephen A. Smith is not going to do that. And so I was listening to Jason Whitlock and Sage Steele, right? And they were talking about how much influence, like who has the most influence at ESPN? Is it Pat McAfee or is it Stephen A. Smith? And in my opinion, I think that Pat McAfee has more influence because Pat McAfee is in a position where he don't really need ESPN, and so if ESPN decided to part ways with him, his platform, is he has a large platform anyway, so it won't even affect his platform either way. But I think it will hurt ESPN more because College Game Day, and he has his show on there, which does very well too. And so for those two reasons, I feel like Pat McAfee, in my opinion, have more influence and power at ESPN than Stephen A. Smith. So, and I think Jason Whitlock kind of agree with that. And I'm going to play some audio between Jason Whitlock and Sage Steele, and they kind of talked and debated about that. And so I want you to listen to this audio, and I want you to give your opinion as to who you think has the most influence, Pat McAfee or Stephen A. Smith.
Real takeaway from all of this is that Pat McAfee is much more powerful at ESPN than Stephen A. Smith. I and I know Stephen A. has the contract, and I know he has some sort of race leverage over these leftists at ESPN. But I don't think I think they would let Stephen A. Smith go well before they would let Pat McAfee go. I think McAfee has real value.
Now I don't know about that. Wow, because I think that if all right, so if it came to a point where they needed to make a decision to hold on to Stephen A. Smith or between Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee, Stephen A. Smith is very valuable there because Stephen A. Smith they can say things through Stephen A. Smith that they wouldn't be able to say through Pat McAfee, right? And so that's very valuable. Pat McAfee is this guy is like he a loose cannon. He no telling what Pat McAfee is going to say. So I think that's something to think about though. Pat McAfee he's not as controllable and predictable as Stephen A. Smith is.
Value.
I'd have to really think about that and break that down. I mean, he's had the Stephen A. rules for a very, very long time. And I know, obviously, I know your feelings about Stephen A. I no matter what, he's probably the hardest working person that I was around at ESPN for 16 and a half years. And he is still owned by them with First Take, but he's brilliant in many ways and has convinced them. Do you notice if you watch First Take, which I haven't, even when I was there, I wasn't watching it, but you see a clip and at the bottom of the screen, it's promoting Stephen A.'s YouTube show. On the bottom of the First Take screen, that it's not, ESPN doesn't own that. ESPN isn't getting a penny from Stephen A.'s YouTube show, I don't believe, right? So he convinced them to promote his show that he's making a whole other income off of on ESPN platform. Like, he's got so much power.
But even though he is getting them to promote his show, his show's still not as big as Pat McAfee's, and therefore he don't have as much leverage with ESPN as Pat McAfee do, right? I just think that Stephen A. Smith, his value is in the fact that he will do and say what the network want him to, and so they are going to give him they're going to give him, allow him certain liberties and stuff like that. But other than that, I don't think that is that really comes into play. The fact that they promote his show on their network, they can cut that out. They can't cut Pat McAfee's, they can't really affect Pat McAfee's his rating or how much exposure his platform get.
And very many unique ways as well. So I don't know, because they're different. They're very different, right? And Stephen A. does represent more of the woke culture in many ways because of some of his comments while trying to balance that out. And Pat McAfee, he's not political, but he kind of just speaks the truth. To your point about what does he do to counter this? You're right. He's a competitive guy. He might, come up with another big name guest on his own. But the difference is that his show isn't airing on ESPN airwaves like Pat McAfee's is. So it's very separate. ESPN can separate themselves from Stephen A.
Oh, you're talking about his YouTube show. I think on First Take, he's got to bring Michelle Obama or someone on.
That's not going to resonate. I mean, is she relevant now? She's trying to be.
Well, I'm trying to think. He's got to bring Gavin Newsom on, or he's got, maybe he's got to host Drag Queen Story Hour on his.
I just think that, without getting into the politics and everything I just think that Stephen A. Smith, he says, and he's more of a company man than Pat McAfee, right? And so whatever happens with ESPN, like Stephen A. Smith, he's there no matter what. Pat McAfee has other options, and he has a large platform on his own. And so his platform, I think, is has a more of a what kind of following, more loyal following than I think Stephen A. Smith platform does. Like Stephen A. Smith built built his platform through ESPN. So he has to go down with the ship. I mean, he's in it for the long haul. Pat McAfee can separate himself from ESPN and be, and not miss a step. Stephen A. Smith built his platform through, through ESPN. So he really is, he's connected at the hip with ESPN. So therefore, I would say Pat McAfee has, even with that being said, still is in a better position. I also think that they probably would get rid of Pat McAfee before they did Stephen A. Smith, because Stephen A. Smith is more, like I said, he's more loyal to what they want to do over there. And so Stephen A. Smith will go down with that ship. So that's my take on the situation. YouTube is really leaning heavy on ESPN, and I don't know how they're going to be able to compete with YouTube. It's tough. So with that being said, man, y'all make sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to leave a comment, and I'll check you all out in the next video. Peace.